I'd now like to introduce our next technology trendsetter speaker, Satyen Sangani, the CEO and co-founder for Alation, which is a B2B enterprise whose efforts are focused on data catalog, analytics, and data management. It's a SaaS company that's rethinking and revolutionizing analytics. Prior to starting Alation, Mr. Sangani has nearly a decade of experience at Oracle, where he ran the financial service warehousing and performance management business. Prior to that, he was an associate with the private investment firm Texas Pacific Group and an analyst with Morgan Stanley. Mr. Sangani loves working with other growing entrepreneurs with the social and political causes that he believes in. By investing or advising, Mr. Sangani is willing to contribute to such projects. Today, Mr. Sangani will be speaking about the domain trends and the unique value proposition of his company, Alation. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Sangani to the stage.
Hello everyone, it's great to be here, and I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm kind of getting over a cold, so if I sort of start coughing, you'll just have to excuse me. So we've heard a lot about various trends, most of which have been informed by data. The first of obviously is with generative AI, and then the second one obviously is with all the efficiencies that one can drive in the world of manufacturing and the world of supply chain, with the example, of course, being automotive. We at Alation exist in I think, at the substrate of data. And so what we are trying to do at Alation is enable people in their various roles to be able to acquaint themselves with all of the data that may exist inside and outside of an enterprise. And so that's our reason for existence. And so when we talk about our vision, we talk about this idea of empowering curiosity and rationality. So if you think about most jobs, to the extent that many jobs are going to be AI enabled, to the extent that many jobs are going to require higher order thinking, most of these jobs will require data. And so on some level, every job, in our view, or every knowledge worker job is going to become one that requires people to use data and to understand data writ large. But most people don't. Most people don't understand data because it requires some technical knowledge, because often data sets are codified by programmers who basically have built data models, and often those data models are not really very well understood by people. If you think about text, Google can search the wide internet and understand all of these web pages because all these web pages are in English. But in the case of data, most of this stuff is in code values and numbers and hexadecimal fields, and all of these things are less comprehensible to people. And so our aspiration is to really make the world of data accessible to more people inside of the companies and the programs that we service. So I guess most of this is really, we have lots of investors. We've raised, I guess at this point, $300 million in capital, the most recent round of which was in November of last year. I think all of this is basically all to say, guilt by association. You might want to listen to me because there's some smart people that have invested in us. But I think, the essence of why we need to exist, if you think about all of this technology that's getting created and getting created at an accelerated pace, the cloud is actually generating new and newer workloads consistently. So if you think about AWS and GCP and Azure, and even all of the applications that are built on top of every one of these bits of infrastructure, that pace is only increasing. CIOs are creating new applications within their walls. There are new SaaS applications being built constantly. There are new data integrations and workloads being built constantly. And so in a world where software is being built so much more quickly and models are being built so much more quickly, there's a lot of noise that comes in the world of this data exhaust that comes out of all of these systems. So there's so much data, so many different tools, so many different workloads, that now navigating this information has actually become the problem in and of itself. Because when you have models built on models, software built on software, being able to just debug and understand what the root cause of something might be, where something came from, what cause and effect looks like, that is a really hard problem in a world that is accelerating so quickly. And what's interesting about data is that you might think that companies that have data and are managing data are actually more expert at doing it. That if you have some Snowflake, if you have Databricks, if you have AWS, that you might be better and better at using data over time. But the reality is that, in fact, as you get to use more data, it actually becomes harder and harder to manage. Right? So, there's now, I think, 143 zettabytes of data. There are 650 times more jobs, or 650% more jobs in data than there were just a decade ago. And most jobs now require some facility with data to be used. And so that is what makes this category of software that Alation represents, what we call data intelligence, much more critical, because now it's not only about just visualizing your data or building models. It's about being able to understand and leverage your data at scale as an organization. And so in the same way that financials obviously have systems like NetSuite and SAP, in the same way that automotive manufacturers now have systems like Technion, you need a data supply chain management company. You need something that's going to really understand all of your data writ large, and that's exactly what Alation represents. And we need that capability because the data is moved all around the world and all over, both on-premise and in cloud. You have people using the data all over the world. You have lots of different tools, literally thousands of different tools there to manipulate and leverage the data. You've got so many different types of data types: relational assets, video assets, textual assets, structured, semi-structured reports. You have all of these different types of data. And then you have all of these regulations that manage the information. And so because of that, you need some sort of mechanism to manage all of this data. And that's broadly what Alation does. And I would argue this is probably a new category of software that many of you might not have heard of. You've probably heard of things like visualization technologies. How many of you have heard of Tableau or Click? Those are well-known technologies. You've obviously heard of the underlying data substrate, so things like Snowflake and Databricks. Those are obviously very big companies, very, very well-known, some of the most valuable companies in all of software. And you've certainly heard of AI companies. But the thing that makes all of this tick, the thing that is where most of the people with data spend all of their time, is not necessarily inside of these tools, but it's actually with the manipulation of the data writ large. And so when you hear about large data contracts from the IBM Global Services, or from the Infosys, or from the Accentures, most of what people are trying to do is what this intelligence layer of software is doing. They're trying to organize the data and understand it and categorize it. And that's why basically this category of software needs to exist. And so this is a large growing category. When I founded the company about 10 years ago, I would say that this category was probably maybe about $1 billion in scale. Today, over the next 5 years, it's estimated to become roughly $7 or $8 billion in scale and $25 billion by the end of the decade. So really, really large transformation of human labor to what is now a much larger and larger growing software category. And so this all is about sort of delivering the right data to the right person at the right time. And that seems like a relatively simple problem, but it's one that effectively takes up most of our time and capacity. And I'll just say one more thing that gives you some sense for the scale of this issue or the scale of this problem, which is the customers that we have. We've got customers like Cisco and Salesforce and Hertz and Aon and NASDAQ and DocuSign. And so it's a very broad cross-section of customers in almost every industry, all of whom are basically using data in order to differentiate in what they do. And so the company now has achieved some significant notoriety and recognition. We're recognized as a category leader by Forrester, by Gartner, by IDC, so most of the major analyst firms. But you would also have seen that we've reached over $100 million in ARR. And so not only have we achieved that sort of nice unicorn status, but we're also a company that has achieved a lot of scale in sort of its own service to customers with growing and accelerating at pace. And so I would basically argue that if this data substrate layer is not an area that you have heard of or spent time in, it's arguably the one most transformative layer, because you can't do generative AI, you can't do good supply chain, you can't do anything unless you have great data. And so I would recommend that you keep tabs on this space, learn more about the data infrastructure, because it is where many jobs are going to be going over time. So I was going to try to keep it short and sweet. I know we're a bit behind schedule, but I did want to catch us up, and hopefully this gives you some idea to pique your curiosity around the world of data, because I think it is a space that is transforming quite quickly, and one that I think is going to be very consequential over time. And we expect to build a $1 billion revenue company, and it's something that we want to do forward. So I'm not going to go through most of the slides, but I will show you maybe one screenshot because I think it's very helpful. If you look at a data set inside of a database, this would be a database like Snowflake or a database like Mongo or something like Databricks. The field names would be something like Avocet stat metrics. That's the codified value at the very top of the screen, in the top right-hand corner. But that data doesn't come with a lot of context. And so what Alation will do is basically make that data well described, right? And that is what gives and brings the data to life so that any human being can access and understand the information. And so we use AI to tag the data. We basically build workflows on top of the data. We tell you who knows something about the data. We categorize the data in domains. And that's what basically makes the data come to life. And so it's all of this machine-generated information, machine-understood information that we're basically trying to bring to utilize by human beings and by people in their everyday work and ethics. So if this is a category that has been interesting to you, I've got a podcast. We talk a lot about this idea of data culture, where we're trying to build organizations who are more data-driven. And so I have lots of leaders that come on top of our podcast who talk, people like General Stanley McChrystal, and authors and journalists who all talk about sort of scientific thinking and what it means to think rationally and what it means to build organizational cultures. So do tune into that. And thank you very much for the recognition and for the time. We're expanding our presence in India quite significantly. I'm actually off to Mumbai on Friday evening, and we're going to be opening up our new office in Chennai, which is going to have 150 people there with 200 people throughout India, and we expect that investment to double over the next 3 years. And so there's a lot that we're doing on the subcontinent, and it's really exciting to get this recognition and this award. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I would now like to invite Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee and Mr. Rajan Nabani onto the stage to present you with a Trendsetters plaque. Thank you.
We have to step away for a call, so I'm covering for him.
Come to the center, please.